Hi, my name is Martin Köring. I'm the head of the Economist Impact's World Ocean Initiative, which imagines an ocean in robust health and with a vital economy. The World Ocean Summit is an integral part of the work we do on accelerating a sustainable ocean economy. You can find out more about the initiative's work, including coverage on key themes discussed during the summit on our website, ocean.economist.com. Welcome to today's plenary panel, How to Implement and Manage Marine Protected Areas. The session will explore what it will take to make MPAs work. It will also highlight some of the best practices in the region in areas such as community engagement, leadership, and investment. And also, very importantly, how can ocean leaders ensure that MPAs are more than mere paper parts? So I'm joined today by three excellent, very experienced panelists. So first of all, we have William Koska. He's Executive Director of the Micronesia Conservation Trust. We have Carol Pua, who is Global Coral Reef Rescue Initiative Lead and also Global Lead for MPAs at WWF. And we have, last but not least, Jian Ma, who is Vice President of the Paradise Foundation. You will find out more in terms of the speakers today, the full biographies of our panelists on the screen under this media player. There are also a few additional resources there, links to relevant articles on MPAs from the World Ocean Initiative. I would like to structure the conversation today in four main parts. First of all, highlighting the importance of MPAs. I mean, why is this topic so important? Marine protection in the ocean, and then also the role of partnerships, collaborations, and the role of sustainable finance, blue finance instruments, and how to invest in MPAs, and finally, how do we measure success? So without further ado, let's start with the conversation. So I'd like to start with the importance of this topic. I mean, why is this so relevant? Why are we talking about MPAs? And of course, COP26 last month, the ocean climate nexus, the importance of protecting nature was discussed. And this came out of the conversations there in terms of a solution to climate impact. So Carol, I would like to start with you. Can you explain to us how MPAs and networks of locally managed marine areas can make ocean ecosystems more resilient in the face of climate change and ocean acidification as well? And how do they benefit people?
Great, thanks, Martin. I think when we talk about marine protected areas, in WWF, we talk about marine protected and conserved areas. So they include the locally managed marine areas as well, because they make a huge contribution to biodiversity and also sustainable development. So I think it's an incredibly relevant topic because often we focus on these areas to do a lot of the damage control in terms of what's happening with overfishing and removal of forests, mangrove forests, for example. And we're expecting, up to less than 10% of the ocean to do the grunt work of recovering our ocean. And actually, we should be thinking in a much bigger context. Okay, if these are the engine rooms for the ocean for us to protect biodiversity and to build resilience, then we should be protecting more of these areas with communities and working with them in partnership. So I think from what we've seen in COP, nature-based solutions, the climate COP that's just been in Glasgow, nature-based solutions are an integral part of us achieving the Paris Agreement. And I think investing in marine protected areas is fundamental to achieving the targets of the Paris Agreement. Although, a lot of the focus is on mitigation, adaptation plays a fundamental role as well in achieving the Paris Agreement.
Great, thanks a lot, Carol. And you highlighted the nature-based solutions, and of course, marine protected areas are such the great way to kind of to harness these nature-based solutions. And you mentioned the engine room of the ocean, which is very powerful, a kind of symbol for that. So I'd like to go to William now. I mean, you have been the executive director of the Micronesia Conservation Trust since 2006. Many people may not be familiar with Micronesia. Can you share a bit about it and also the importance of marine protected areas in the region?
Thank you very much, Martin. So the Micronesia is, of course, located between the Philippines and Hawaii, and it covers several jurisdictions in just the North Pacific. And for the people of Micronesia, fish has always been the driver of our economy, as well as for our livelihoods. A lot of people depend on fisheries. And so we need to manage these fisheries. And one of the management tools is, of course, marine protected areas. And especially when you're working with communities and the government to protect spawning aggregation sites, very important spawning aggregation sites. And we've seen a good number of those spawning aggregation sites that have been decimated over the years. And by putting in protected areas, we've been able to bring some of those back. And so it's really quite important. And as Carol mentioned, it's also one of our strategies for adapting to the impacts of climate change, is to have these networks of protected areas across Micronesia.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, William. You highlighted, how important marine protected areas are for Micronesia, both in terms of adaptation, but also in terms of, as you mentioned, as a vital part of the local ecosystem as well. And I mean, John, you have worked on climate change and nature conservation issues in China for many years. Now you are the vice president of the Paradise Foundation, a non-profit environmental organization with a focus on nature conservation. Why is your organization interested in marine conservation?
Thanks, Martin. The Paradise Foundation was established in 2015, and we are a China-based organization. We first focusing on the protected area, especially promote the land trust in China. We have already managed 6 protected areas with the support of local government and the local communities. We are all aware of that marine covers 7% of the Earth and play an unique and important role in sustained biodiversity and human well-being. Therefore, our board members discussed that this is a very important issue for us to tackle. So we started marine conservation project in 2019. And I think this opportunity is also a learning opportunity for us. And in marine conservation, we are focusing on 3 major areas with advice of the experts and through our survey: the marine protected area, blue carbon, and capacity building to marine conservation organizations in China. From our understanding, establish marine protected area is one of the most important measures concerning marine conservation. We are far below the needs of marine protected areas. Most of the countries are below 10% targets of the H targets. For example, in China, the total marine protected areas only covers less than 5% of China's marine. So this is a very important issue, not only in China, but all over the world. So we started thinking of make some contribution on this area.
Brilliant, thanks a lot, John. And you highlighted the need to kind of step up across the world, really, in terms of marine protection, because we're clearly far below this target of 30 by 30 when it comes to marine protection. And you highlighted why it's so important as well in China to focus on marine protection. You mentioned local communities there, John, and I wanted to follow up on that because it's so important to build this kind of connection with local communities and to work collaboratively in partnerships. So, at the Paradise Foundation, you're involved in collaborations and partnerships as well, of course, for example, with Ocean X, the Ocean Exploration Initiative that was founded by Ray Dalio. Tell us a bit more about the importance of building partnerships for marine protection and engaging civil society.
Okay. I think civil society is play and will play an important role in marine conservation. Not only the organizations, but also the local communities. Especially the local communities are benefit from the marine support. So we think that to manage marine protected areas well, we need to put the local community in a very important role, because from our experiences in land conservation, most of the threats are coming from the local community, but the local community also playing the protected role. So we need to balance their needs and their contributions in protection. So I think the partnership with the local community is very important. But also we need to bring more scientific research institutes and also universities to this game, because they bring a lot of insights or scientific researches to make the marine protected protected areas well. So I think that the partnership is very important. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jan. And you mentioned, the need to involve the local community, both in terms of, addressing the needs, but also harnessing the skills and the opportunities in the local communities, and involving other communities like the scientific community as well. That's very important. Carol, I also wanted to ask you about the importance of partnerships and collaborations. I mean, at the Coral Reef Rescue Initiative, for example, you have built a kind of global partnership between WWF and other organizations such as the Wildlife Conservation Society, RARE, CARE, International Blue Ventures, Vulcan, and also the scientific community, as John mentioned, with the University of Queensland. How can partnerships accelerate progress on marine protected areas?
Thanks, Martin. I think the core partners that you mentioned are more on at the global level. Our partners on the ground are actually the local communities and the governments and the local institutions there. We went through a 2-year process where we really designed the whole initiative from the bottom up, doing a lot of community consultations. I think one of the biggest challenges in the marine protected and conserved area space is a lot of marine protected and conserved areas are just badly designed. And you don't have enough feedback and input from local communities and stakeholders. And what you find is often you're trying to either enforce a boundary that doesn't work for local communities or doesn't make sense, and is also in conflict with other sectors. Local communities in different parts of the world are up against different sectors, such as the gas and oil sector. You're talking about logging, you're talking about mining. So, you're talking about protected areas and communities who benefit from these protected areas up against these other economic sectors as well. So I think having a good design process where community members and local government authorities are a part of with local experts is important. And that's what the Coral Reef Rescue Initiative has been doing in partnership with these countries. So that's the first challenge, making sure that you are designing a marine protected and conserved area that makes ecological, social, and economic sense as well long term, and it is developed and designed with a sustainable development lens. And then the second part, of course, is the implementation challenge. It's a huge challenge because if the communities don't see the benefit, if and you're not working in partnership with communities, then you often find there's long-term implementation challenges that could lead to, I think, people not really seeing the long-term benefit of these protected and conserved areas. So I think, Martin, there's a lot of things to be done in terms of partnership, true partnership, which means often working in understanding what is the vision of the local community for the site. And they have a long connection and traditional knowledge into the system as well that needs to be married with what we know from, I guess, more the Western science world's understanding, and applying those in a landscape seascape approach as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Karen. And you highlighted that it's not just about the design process. I mean, involving ecological, economic, and social measures, but also the implementation challenge and getting local communities involved in that. That they see the benefits and that the traditional knowledge is incorporated is really crucial. Thanks a lot, Carol, for highlighting that. And I wanted to ask William as well. I mean, you work with many diverse partners at the Micronesia Conservation Trust to boost MPAs. I mean, you are also the co-coordinator of the Pacific Islands Marine Protected Areas Community and also of the IUCN WPCA Micronesia Sub-Region Marine Program. So you work with lots of different stakeholders. Tell us more about your experience of effective partnerships and collaborations for marine protection.
Thank you. So in Micronesia, we've really taken up the three-pronged partnership approach, which includes the local communities, civil society organizations, and other technical organizations, as well as the governments. And you know, in order to sustain the work, we need all three groups to be working together, because the local governments have the mandate over the resource or are the resource management authority, but you know, they're always under-resourced, and the true owners of the natural resources are those who are there every day in the villages, you know, using those resources and managing those resources. And of course, you've got the NGOs and the technical organizations that help bring in the additional resources to help with the management of these areas. So all three have to be working in you know, real collaboration in order for any of this to work. And we also have seen, you know, changes in the political administrations. So it's always good to have everybody on the same page as we're moving forward. So yeah, when you have these mechanisms in place, then you can sustain the work beyond political administrative changes.
Yeah, those are great points. Thanks a lot, William. I mean, you highlighted that, you know, local communities, NGOs and civil society organizations, as well as governments, have to work together to collaborate. And you made a great point there also in terms of, you know, under-resourced communities, and that, you know, there's always this challenge of, you know, access to finance and access to investment to really make marine protection work. So I'd like to focus now on this kind of sustainable finance challenge for MPAs. And I'd like to follow up with you, William, directly. I mean, you have vast experience when it comes to sustainable finance. I mean, for example, you guided the development of, you know, 2 iterations of the Regional Sustainable Finance Plan, you know, for the Micronesia Challenge. You know, this is kind of an intergovernmental initiative to conserve marine and forest resources. Could you tell us a bit more about your experience when it comes to kind of, you know, raising blue finance for marine protection?
Thank you. So in order for us to sustainably finance the Micronesia Challenge initiative, which is an initiative to protect 30% of our marine resources and 20% of our terrestrial resources, we have to look at the cost, the real cost of implementing the program. And we looked at existing government budgets that were going into marine protected areas. We looked at grants that were coming in, and then also looked at other sustainable finance, local sources of income that could be, you know, that could go towards supporting protected area networks across Micronesia, the 5 jurisdictions that are involved in the Micronesia Challenge. And so we developed the real costs, looking at what it costs to support communities with their MPA work. And with that, we were able to use that tool to go to donors and go to the leaders across Micronesia to say, this is what it will cost you to effectively manage the 30% and 20% that you've committed to. And so we've actually used this tool to raise money internationally, but also to establish local revenue sources from our national governments to support the work of the Micronesia Challenge.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, William. And that's very helpful. I mean, that, you know, highlighting this kind of practical example of, you know, how you made it work in the Micronesia context. But I can imagine there could be lots of learnings in terms of, you know, how you kind of, you know, calculate the kind of the real costs of effective management, and then went to kind of local sources as well as government sources and international donors as well. So that's really good to see this practical examples. John, I also wanted to ask you about the finance challenges and how you overcome them. I mean, Blue Finance is of course crucial for the Paradise International Foundation as well. I mean, a couple of years ago you launched the Blue Initiative Fund with support from the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, for example, the Rockefeller Foundation and others. Tell us about your experience of raising sustainable finance for marine protection.
I think from our perspective, the marine protection, the biggest player of marine protection is the government. So the government should put should take the biggest responsibility to funding the marine protection. And the second part is the philanthropist. You know, as our experience, we have initiated the Blue Initiative, and to attract the philanthropist, you need to bring a very realistic, you know, project or case, you know, to persuade the philanthropist to first make the philanthropist understand your philosophy, your concept, and then you can clearly define your outcomes or your result to them. So to make them trust you and to trust you have the ability to implement that. The third part, I think, the funding may coming from the market, because, you know, as the climate change part, the carbon market is very active right now. And, you know, I have been doing a lot of forest carbon project before to use the carbon market. And now we are talking about the marine, the blue carbon issues. So we still can use this the channel to channel the money to the marine conservation part. So from my understanding, these three major these are the three major funding sources.
Great, thanks a lot, John. I mean, you highlighted, you know, it's you know, it starts with the governments because they have, you know, a lot of resources, but also, you know, explaining, you know, the benefits also to philanthropists is important, and, you know, the emergence of the, you know, the blue carbon market is really crucial. So great, thanks a lot for highlighting that. And so, Carol, I'd also like to ask you about, you know, your experience in terms of blue finance. I mean, many of the most productive coral reefs, for example, are found, you know, in countries, you know, that have challenges in terms of access to finance. I mean, how do you overcome this problem, and, you know, how do you raise the required blue finance to support MPAs?
Let me just start at a much more urgent level right now. We know with COVID and, you know, international travel being restricted, a lot of marine protected and conserved areas are actually low in income. So a lot of the tourism actually coming in to coastal areas supported a lot of livelihoods. And so in a paper that we wrote for Parks, we looked at the impact of COVID on marine protected and conserved areas, and the impact has been huge. I mean, we've seen a lot of community members losing livelihoods, governments reducing budgets for implementation and management of marine protected and conserved areas. So I think what we have discovered is we need to be thinking about finance around marine protected and conserved areas at a much larger scale. We can't be just thinking about how do we keep this one marine protected area well funded and managed, but we need to be thinking about the entire seascape and landscape. How do we ensure that there is a blue economy or a green economy model behind it? How do we shift entire landscapes and seascapes to be more sustainable? And I think that's where it gets exciting for private sector to come in with impact investment, for example. So the Coral Reef Rescue Initiative, we are bringing in public money. We're applying for public money to de-risk that investment for impact investors and private sector to come in to invest at a large seascape and landscape level so that we can fund the work to shift unsustainable practices like sugarcane farming or palm oil to much more sustainable practices, and also help fishermen and fisher folk to adapt and to change, to retrain. And that requires large injection of capital as well. I think what's also essential is for us to think about, I mean, how marine spatial planning has always been a big challenge in a lot of areas in relation to marine protected and conserved areas, because we are competing for space. But I think where we see a lot of benefit, I mean, 25% of all life and biodiversity in the ocean is in the reefs. If we don't prioritize sustainable development and investment and conservation of these reefs, up to 1 billion people might lose their livelihoods and food source. So I think as a collective community, private, public, and philanthropic need to come together to really invest in a much more focused way to ensure that we focus on areas that we know have the potential to survive a 1.5 degree warming. And then using that approach, we've focused on 7 countries that make up the portfolio of coral reef rescue. The Global Fund for Coral Reefs is a very good example and initiative, bringing together private and public sector together for investment in partnership with governments. And we'd like to see more of that. But I think we need to start thinking beyond the boundary of the marine protected and conserved area. I think that's a huge challenge for those of us working in that space, to really think at the larger landscape and seascape level.
Yeah, great points, Carol. There, I mean, you highlighted, the holistic view, and marine protected areas are part of, this kind of holistic view of looking at the whole kind of seascapes and the blue economy more broadly. And great for, that you mentioned this example of the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, as an example of how to kind of bring these different sources of sustainable finance together. And marine spatial planning, this competition for space and the need to kind of organize this in a more effective way is really important. And just speaking about this kind of need, for measuring, the marine space, but also measuring success in communities. I wanted to kind of follow up with you, Carol, on this kind of point of how do we actually measure success when it comes to these initiatives. I mean, for example, for the Coral Reef Rescue Initiative, or for the Global Fund, I mean, how do you measure success? What type of metrics do you use to ensure MPAs are functioning as designed and as they are meant to be implemented? I mean, what are your ways to measure success?
I think if you're thinking about just within the ecological boundary, we're talking a lot about, there's a lot of MPA management effectiveness tools that can be applied. We as Coral Reef Rescue, we're not just interested in building the resilience of coral reefs, but also the resilience of coastal communities and the communities that benefit directly from coral reefs being healthy and resilient. So I think there we're really looking at benefit sharing, adaptation ability of communities. Resilience is often measured in a very simple way in terms of what are the options and opportunities for a community. A community with very limited set of options is often not very resilient, because they're very dependent on 1 or 2 sources of income. So I think for us, adaptation is a very serious business, and protected and conserved areas play a vital role in that. So for us, in terms of measure of success, I think ability of coastal communities to co-manage these resources with local governments, so that polycentric governance is very essential. Talking about diversifying livelihoods is incredibly essential for us as well. Thinking about social inclusion and gender issues as well. How much of the women folk are actually involved in some of these economic activities and are benefit sharing. And I think at a very simple biophysical level, we're looking at reef health, water quality, how is waste managed, and health of local communities. We often find water issues around catchment and clean water affects not only the reefs, but affects communities as well. So these are very simple metrics. We're working on a data management ecosystem where we can integrate different data sources to give us a global view on how we are actually progressing against all these different indicators. When we looked at all the indicators, we came up to 1,000 indicators on how to tell that story, that narrative, which is a lot. And so we're trying to simplify that narrative and working with a company called Palo IT to put this dashboard together. I think above all, I think it's really important that we demonstrate what success looks like. and work with communities to demonstrate what success looks like. And I think communities that understand and see the benefit, they are the best proponents for marine protected and conserved areas being expanded. And so we need to be really sure that the tools that we are advocating for make sense for the communities and are appropriate. And we're not just talking out of a generic song sheet that doesn't make sense to a local context. So success for us is measured very simply in resilient reefs being healthy and abundant and doing well in a 1.5-degree world, hopefully, and coastal communities having the options for livelihood and adaptation so that they can be resilient as well.
Thanks a lot, Carol. And yeah, 1,000 indicators, somehow that's a challenge. But you highlighted that it's important to kind of make this meaningful and to make it meaningful in the local context. And you mentioned the different indicators you could look at in terms of resilient reefs, but also just the biophysical indicators, but also the social indicators, often neglected. The dimension in terms of inclusion, the gender dimension, and so on. So thanks for highlighting that. John, I also wanted to ask you in terms of all of the great work you're doing in China in terms of marine protection and conservation more broadly. How do you measure success for the marine protection initiatives that you are supporting?
We are just the start of the marine protected area. So it's very challenging part for us to define the success or measure the success. But from our past experiences in land conservation, we have 4 indicators to define that, but I think that can be replicated or used in marine protected areas. The first one is from the biodiversity part, the ecosystem or the species healthy. So that's the first one. The second indicator is about the threats. The threats is decreasing or decreased through our conservation measures. The third part is we need to have one capable team on the ground to implement the conservation activities or to carry out all the activities. The fourth part is fourth indicator is the local community can benefit from the well-protected ecosystems. So that's a 4 part we are thinking of.
Okay, brilliant. I mean, yeah, that's super important. I mean, to actually take the learning from from some of the land conservation initiatives and seeing how they can be applied to marine conservation, given the long history of land conservation initiatives. And you mentioned, the need to look at biodiversity, looking at threat reduction, looking at the teams and the capacities on the ground, as well as the local community work. So thanks for highlighting that. And William, just finally also on this point of measuring success, I mean, what type of metrics do you use in Micronesia, when it comes to new initiatives, kind of to ensure kind of MPAs are functioning as designed, and also provide the benefits that they are supposed to provide for local communities and ecosystems?
Thank you, Martin. I think Carol and Gianna have covered most of what I think are the best ways to measure success. I just want to add that we look at the community's ability to manage their protected areas and how that influences how the community integrates it into the regular livelihoods of everybody in those communities. So if it's starting to influence the way they think in other areas of life in terms of organizing their community, and we're seeing this in some of the more successful communities where they started with marine protected area management, and now they're using that sort of thinking and planning work in other areas in their lives where they're working together on alternative livelihoods and other areas that are improving their their economy and their how they live socially. And so we look at that as a measure of success when it's really starting to influence the way they live on a daily basis.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, William. Highlighting actually that impact at the local community level is really crucial and often neglected. Just in the interest of time, I just wanted to ask you just also by way of kind of summarizing, what is the one thing each of you thinks that needs to happen to get to 30 by 30? I mean, what's the one focus area to really accelerate MPAs and marine protection? If you could highlight just a minute or so your one key priority and why, that'd be great. So I'd like to start with Carol, please.
Just a minute, Martin. That's very short. I'll do my best. I think a huge success would be, I think, working in partnership with local communities and resourcing and empowering them to do what they have a vision for, and bringing together innovative partnerships, both private and public and philanthropic funding together. I think that's very essential. I think finally, if I could just throw in a third one, I think it's also really critical for us to prioritize. I think if 30 by 30 is going to work, including these locally managed marine areas in that as well, we need to start with those areas that need urgent attention and prioritize our efforts. And I think that requires high level of coordination and cooperation between the governments, the NGOs, local communities, and philanthropic organization. Everybody needs to get on board and prioritize these critical sites such as coral reefs.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Carol. I mean, highlighting communities, the partnerships, but also, prioritization is such an important topic, and it's coming out of COP26 and seeing all the different pledges, all the different announcements, but really prioritizing in terms of what works. And today we heard a couple of great examples from the work of the three of you in terms of what to prioritize. John, as well, I mean, the question to you, I mean, what's the one thing that needs to happen, or the three things, but briefly, to get to 30 by 30? What is your focus?
I think concerning the 30 by 30, I think we need to consider the civil society as a very important player in this part. And we need to encourage and empower them to contribute more on the marine protected areas. And we need give them more resources and trainings for the marine protected areas management. I think the design is very important, but the management and the real implementation is also more important than the design part. So I think that civil society can play a very important role in that.
Great, thanks a lot, Jan, for highlighting the civil society aspect for design and implementation as well, and the capacity building aspect. And finally, William, what is your key focus area in terms of when it comes to 30 by 30? What is the one area to focus on?
I think for us, it's coming together as a region under one initiative. It's really helped us to work together, bring in the necessary financial and technical resources that we need, and through the peer learning networks, we've been able to learn from each other. And so it's really coming together as a region, and we've been able to raise money that way as well, developing a regional endowment that's over $27 million now, which is supporting the protected area network activities that are going on. So it's in order to scale the work that we're all doing, it's always good to come together as a region, and we're also part of the Global Island Partnership, which is also a partnership of different networks across the globe, and we are also learning from the other initiatives. Conservation can be a lonely place to be in, so it's always good to be working together with other partners regionally and globally.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, William, for highlighting this, the need to come together as a region and to learn from each other. So thanks so much to all of the panelists for your great contributions. Just very briefly summarizing, the need to kind of bring in nature-based solutions. A marine protected area, of course, is a very important management tool. The design process, we heard, about the need also to look at the implementation process, to work with local communities, to balance the needs and the contributions of local communities, to look at the real cost of marine protection, and also making the case to the different finance players from government philanthropy and also the blue carbon markets that we see emerging, and looking at this holistically as a blue economy model. So thanks a lot again to the panelists. The next session at the World Ocean Summit Asia Pacific will be in the fishing track, actually. It will be on from hook to plate, what will drive sustainability across supply chains. Thank you, and we hope to welcome you again soon.